The moment I spotted Patricia Whitmore striding down the Willowbrook neighborhood with 2 police officers flanking her, I had a feeling my peaceful Saturday was about to be disrupted. Clad in her meticulously tailored pantsuit, she waved her arms with exaggerated urgency, pointing toward a group of kids playing kickball in the cul-de-sac, as though she'd stumbled upon some kind of criminal operation. Her voice, sharp and commanding, echoed through the quiet neighborhood as she announced that the children were unsupervised and posed a public safety threat. The officers looked uneasy, clearly unsure how to respond, but that was typical. Patricia had a way of making everyone around her uncomfortable. As one of the officers hesitantly moved toward the kids, I figured it was time to step in. Setting my coffee mug on the porch railing, I rose from the shaded spot where I'd been quietly keeping an eye on everything, sunglasses in one hand and my federal badge in the other. My voice cut cleanly through Patricia's melodrama, calm and controlled. "Officers, is there an issue here?" Earlier that morning, my sister Melissa had frantically called to ask for help. Her babysitter had canceled last minute, and she needed someone to watch her 3 kids along with their 2 cousins. Since I was on medical leave from the FBI due to a minor shoulder surgery, I had the day free and readily agreed. The 5 children, aged between 7 and 12, were polite, well-behaved, and just looking to enjoy a summer Saturday. I set up a safe space for them in the cul-de-sac, kept them hydrated, lathered them in sunscreen, and parked myself on the porch with a perfect line of sight. Willowbrook was the kind of place where kids should be able to play outside without fear. What I hadn't anticipated was Patricia Whitmore, the unofficial watchdog of the Homeowners Association. Watching from behind her designer curtains, she grew increasingly irritated at the sight of children playing without an adult hovering over them. In her mind, this scene was no less than a public threat. She began snapping photos with her phone, each shutter click intensifying her sense of duty. Within minutes, she was furiously typing away on the HOA's online forum, sounding the alarm like she was filing a police report. According to her, a group of unsupervised minors were endangering the community with wild behavior. She cited liability risks and demanded immediate attention from the board. When her dramatic post failed to spark the chaos she hoped for, she escalated, calling 3 board members, growing more hysterical with each retelling. By her 3rd call, she was accusing the children of vandalizing property and hurling rocks at passing vehicles. Martha Henderson, the HOA treasurer, suggested Patricia simply walk over and assess the situation herself. But Patricia refused, insisting on maintaining professional boundaries as HOA president. Undeterred, she fired off a mass text to the neighborhood watch group, attaching the photos she'd taken and urging parents to keep their children indoors until the crisis was contained. Then, with the certainty of someone who's never been held accountable for wasting public resources, she dialed 911. The dispatcher likely sighed as Patricia frantically described what she framed as child endangerment and abandonment, carefully omitting that the setting was a quiet cul-de-sac in broad daylight. 2 officers were dispatched, possibly expecting a dire situation. What they found was Patricia, standing at the curb with a speech prepared and a gleam in her eye, ready to once again protect the neighborhood from imaginary threats. As Officer Chan approached the kids, who had now paused their game to stare at the scene unfolding with innocent curiosity, I calmly crossed the yard and held up my badge, so there'd be no confusion. "Good afternoon, officers. Special Agent Marcus Thompson, FBI. I'm on medical leave and currently supervising my nieces and nephews." The look that washed over Patricia's face at that moment was absolutely priceless. Her jaw worked uselessly, opening and closing like a fish out of water as she tried to process what she'd just heard. The officers, clearly relieved, loosened up. Chan even allowed himself a brief smile. Officer Rodriguez, the more senior of the 2, took my ID and began verifying my credentials as I calmly walked them through what had actually happened. I pointed out the spot on the porch where I had been stationed, and how it provided an unobstructed view of the cul-de-sac where the children had been playing. I also explained the safety measures I'd implemented. Mandatory water breaks every 30 minutes. Patricia tried to interrupt with vague references to HOA rules about adult-to-child supervision ratios, but Rodriguez held up a hand, silencing her. His focus was on something more serious. Why she had jumped straight to calling 911 without even attempting to clarify what was going on. Apparently, This wasn't her first overreaction. The officers already had a file on her. Prior calls that turned out to be baseless, like reporting legitimate movers as suspicious or complaining about teenagers walking their dogs at night. While she stammered something about community safety, I pulled out my phone and showed them footage from the security camera I'd installed. My experience in law enforcement had taught me the value of solid evidence. The video had a clear timestamp and showed me supervising the kids the entire time, even stepping in twice to settle minor disagreements. I also presented a written log I kept, detailing snack times, hydration breaks, and the placement of the first aid kit I'd set out. Rodriguez jotted down notes while Chin checked Patricia's record more thoroughly. The findings were damning. 7 false reports in a year and a half, prior warnings from emergency services, and multiple complaints from neighbors about harassment. Patricia clung to her argument, waving around a dog-eared copy of the HOA manual. She claimed the supervision rules were in a 2019 amendment, flipping frantically through pages she couldn't seem to locate. Rodriguez, patient but firm, explained that HOA policies don't override common sense or the law. Even if her claims had merit, the correct course of action would have been to speak directly with the adult present, not to dial 911 and allege child neglect. The mood shifted sharply when Rodriguez informed her that this incident would be officially recorded as another false report. He laid it out plainly: misuse of emergency services is a criminal offense, and her repeated behavior was approaching the level where charges might be filed. Whatever confidence she had evaporated instantly. She looked stunned, especially as curious neighbors began gathering around to watch the exchange unfold. I kept my posture professional, but inwardly, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing her exposed. After the officers left, giving Patricia a stern final warning, I filed complaints with both the HOA and local police. My training had ingrained in me the importance of creating a paper trail, especially in situations involving harassment. Word got around quickly. By Monday, the community message board was buzzing with residents sharing their own run-ins with Patricia. One parent wrote about her calling the city on a kid's lemonade stand. Another recalled her reporting a basketball hoop to code enforcement. Someone else said she tried to get their child in trouble for drawing chalk art on the sidewalk. The emergency HOA meeting on Thursday was packed. Patricia sat at the front table, stripped of her usual smugness, her face tight with irritation as neighbor after neighbor stood to speak. A single mom recounted being threatened with fines because her son's bike was visible from the street. An elderly couple described how she'd harassed them over decorative garden gnomes. A veteran shared the time she called the police on his service dog for barking during a thunderstorm. My own footage was played on a projector, reinforcing my account beyond any doubt. Board members exchanged uneasy glances as the evidence piled up. The most compelling testimony came from Jennifer Walsh, a retired prosecutor who lived just 2 houses down. She laid out a meticulous record of Patricia's behavior over the last 2 years: dates, documented complaints, and witness statements. Jennifer revealed that Patricia's actions had cost the HOA over $15,000 in unnecessary legal fees and frivolous disputes. She also noted that 3 families had already moved out because of her, and 2 others were considering lawsuits for ongoing harassment. When it came time for the vote, the outcome was swift and unanimous. Patricia Whitmore was immediately removed from her position as HOA president. The charges listed were extensive: abuse of HOA authority, filing false emergency reports, and fostering a hostile community environment. As the gavel dropped, Patricia flushed a deep, unhealthy red and jumped to her feet, toppling her chair. She screamed that we'd regret this when property values crashed without her watchful eye. The final blow came moments later, when the new board president announced that I had been asked to lead a neighborhood safety workshop, focusing on the difference between legitimate concerns and personal bias. Patricia's own behavior would be the case study. She stormed out before they could inform her of the $5,000 fine levied for repeated violations, and the possibility of having to cover any legal fees if neighbors pursued civil action. Her shriek echoed through the community hall, a last desperate outburst as her reign finally collapsed.